why is your name synonymous almost with aerospace now, space and
Well,
aeronautics?
normally all this stuff happens after you're dead. People start finding things, and then they blow those things out of proportion, and they make you a superhero. And so in real life, if you're still living, they try to make you a real hero. But so much time has passed. 50 years is an awful long time, and I was and self-analysis. Is I'm lucky as the devil because I'm still living. And there's so many of the peers that were involved in my space and time. They're all gone.
Do you have fond memories
And
of
so,
training to become an astronaut?
well, that whole episode. I mean, every aspect of it, and it was something. I didn't volunteer to do that, by the way. I was talked into it, if you will, and so I didn't bring to the party a whole bunch of imaginings about what it would be like, and what the challenges were going to be, and how prepared you were for those challenges. I didn't have the luxury of doing that. I had to absorb all that stuff very, very quickly, because when I decided to say yes, I'll do this. Well, everything was all crammed, into a small space, and I didn't have time to reminisce. So everything that happened was a brand new experience. I'm glad I did it, and I just relished in all of the challenges that they keep throwing at you. You know what I mean? And there were numerous things that totally unexpected out of the blue, and I didn't know they could do those kind of things to the human body.
Can you give us a little example of something like that?
No, I mean, they examine every orifice in your body, but they make a lot more orifices in your body. I mean, in order to figure out if your brain, the hand, and eye coordination, and all these things all work, and your brain works properly, they stick 14 needles in your head, and they have an oscilloscope, and there's a pattern on the oscilloscope. And if your eye perception, it goes through your brain, it goes through these little wires to another oscilloscope. And if those things aren't parallel, there's something wrong with your brain interpretation and stuff. There's a whole bunch of fascinating things like that. And at the end of a bioastronautics training, which is about 3 months, and you end up almost having to memorize Gray's Anatomy. You know more about the body than you could ever imagine. How body functions work, and then we operated on animals to examine all the little parts of their bodies and stuff like that. Then our final exam was to supervise autopsy of a freshly dead person, and cutting them parts and pieces, a piece at a time, to see how the body works.
So how intense was some of that training?
No, it is. But it's easy to get. If you got half a brain, it's really easy to get absorbed in. If you're curious, then it's really great. If you're normally a curious person, and I think I was lucky because I've always been a real curious person, and I wasn't psychologically like I told you about this self-preparation. If you want to do something really, really bad, you study it and study it and study it, and you know parts and pieces of it, because you want to do it, And I didn't have that luxury to go through all those things, that prep stuff. So I had to, I kind of had to learn all that stuff on the spot. But, what we did learn, I had to do it on the spot. But it was fabulous, and it helped that I grew up on a farm, and we killed all our animal, so I was accustomed to that aspect of it. So I wasn't afraid of cutting and doing and taking organs and doing all these various things. I mean, that was because I had done it before on the farm. So it worked.
How close were you to going into space?
I was close. The determining date was November the 22nd, 1963. Was when my sponsor was assassinated. That's what happened. And once the president got killed, because he was the one that chose me to be in the thing in the first place, right? And so when he got assassinated, my life changed dramatically. I hung around for another 3 years after that because there was a lot of infighting, a lot of politics involved in it, and all that sort of thing. But that was the determining factor. Had he not been assassinated, then I would have been in a different place. You know.
So you would have gone up there if?
Oh, of course, yeah. I don't think there was no question about that. I mean, that's why the whole thing got started in the first place. I mean, he didn't do this thing on a lark, just like a lot of the naysayers say, well, you know, Dwight, you were just a pawn in a bigger deal, and just nominating you was enough for Kennedy to give to the black community. Okay, and so he's done his job by nominating. Now, if you fail, it's not his fault. You know, if something doesn't work out, it's not the president's fault. The president did what he was, you know, but there was more than that. And he and Bobby Kennedy really wanted this to work, and they wanted to see me in space because they started it and they wanted to finish it.
So how does it sit with you then that your name is in the history books as the first black man to go into aeronautics training?
Well, you know, that has a lot of cachet to it. You know what I mean? And what it has done, and I haven't used it, if you will, because I'm kind of a humble guy, and I don't have a sandwich sign walking around that I was this first guy. You know, it's not all about that. But I find that to get things done in the way our society works, you have to have some cachet from someplace, you know? And as a result of that, they gave me the cachet no matter what I did. After I got out of there and left the military, that little stringer behind my name opened doors like you would not believe, you know, that would not be open to a normal person, you know.
So I was reading in the article about some of the hardships you had to go through as the only black person in the whole training facility, almost in the whole area.
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit about your experience with that?
Yeah. Well, you know, you have to figure why. You know, you have to figure out why that would happen. You know, when you think of those things, if you get a presidential appointment to go do something, you know, and the president didn't do a good job of bringing everybody along. You know, and he spent no time. All this thing happened within a matter of weeks, you know, or months, maybe a couple, 2 or 3 months, you know, from start to finish. That's not how you do this. You know, you start a year, and then you line everybody up. You get all the guys that are going to be against it, and you cajole them to getting on the side. And even if they reluctantly, you got to convince them that it's good for everybody. You know. And so, as a result of that, nobody was brought along, and the naysayers had a big chance to destroy the whole thing, you know, and so they had to do it in several different ways. I mean, they could do it by it's a crazy idea, or they could do it by attacking me personally, and as a result, there are people who deny it, but turns out that when I was assigned to this task, our great Colonel Yeager, who was the head of the test pilot school, I had a meeting and announced to everybody that Washington is trying to cram an N word down our throats. Now, if this guy graduates, the president's going to turn the whole space program black. And that will be the biggest equalizer for racial justice you can imagine, to have the whole astronaut team black, like the NBA players, or like on the basketball court, right? You know, and so so the only way we're going to get rid of this guy is we got to isolate him. Don't talk to him. Don't drink with him. Don't party with him. Don't invite him to your gatherings. And in maybe 6 weeks, 6 months, he'll be gone, because he'll be so discouraged that, you know, so isolated, he'll just quit, you know. And they didn't know me very well about it, because, see, I didn't know that until way after. I'd been in training for quite a while before one of the guys that were in the room confided that to me. You know, that's where I got the information was, and it was so detailed, that and so credible that it, and then my interaction with Yeager was such that he confirmed it, because we had a very caustic relationship between he and I. But it was this thing after thing. We when we're traveling, I'm the only one that didn't have a room. We're traveling as a group. We're going around the world and stuff like that. I didn't have a room, or they'd pay the waitresses not to wait on me, and just craziness. And then a couple of times they had me beat up a couple of times trying to astronaut involved in altercation, and all those things, and I was fighting that, and then they tried to line me up with all these prostitutes, and they'll go tell the president that I'm running around with prostitutes and all that, So it was just one thing after another thing after another, and they're all, which they could have turned into major things, but we were lucky to the point where it was just localized, and what all these other guys didn't know. See, my handler was in the West Wing of the White House, right, and they didn't have handlers in the West Wing of the White House, and so and I knew I had a backup, which allowed me to, take because the mission to me was bigger than all of this little petty stuff that these guys were doing, and would help me out. My sister and I integrated a white high school back in the late 1940s. So we had already gone through that, but the two of us had really gone through that whole thing about this racial integration and the struggle and the name calling, and we had already been there, so it wasn't anything that didn't bother me at all.
That's very big of you, and it just shows you, I guess, your fortitude to press on. Like you said, even after the president was assassinated, you were still there for 3 more years.
Yeah.
What is there anything that sort of like you didn't realize you would go through when, in terms of the specific training, or like that we would have no idea that that's something astronauts have to do when they were doing the training?
Well, it's all split up into, every aspect of it is challenging, but every aspect of it, the way you figure out whether your heart works or not, you put your hand in a bucket of ice cold water, and just leave it there, and your heart starts funneling blood to your hand, and then when your heart gets up to 220 or whatever, then you pull it out, and then flying part of it, the flight testing part of it was, going out to Mach 2 in an F-104 in a spacesuit and climbing up to above the atmosphere and seeing how you can get back in the atmosphere, and that was practice leading up to the space shuttle, because when you enter the atmosphere and the heat generation, all that kind of stuff, and re-entering, and here you got an F-104, take it out to Mach 2, and some guys want to go higher, and you get up 70, 80,000 feet, and it's dark, and you can see the big, beautiful blue encasement that's around the Earth, and it's just absolutely stunningly beautiful. I mean, those kind of things that they're new to you, and you say, "Oh my God, I see what they mean," because up to that point, you're reading it in books and stuff. Now you're seeing it for real.
Is that image burned in your?
Oh God, yeah. Oh my God, yes, yeah. I mean, and all of these little parts and pieces were in flying, and taking an airplane up that doesn't fly very well. The 104 was an airplane that didn't have a real airfoil wing. Clark 1 was it. The lift on the bottom of the wing, because the wings are basically flat, and the leading edge of the wing, you could actually shave off the leading edge of an F-104 airplane. And so they're not worth a damn at turning, but they're good at going straight, and they don't, and they fall like a rock if you shut the engine off, and you get up 35,000 feet and shut the engine off and glide down on a dead engine and landing at 400 knots, because that's what the space shuttle landed at, 400 knots. And
so why did they choose you to go into that?
Well, yeah, well, that's a real good question because statistically they had to sit down and figure out. Like I say, this was all done very, very quickly, and so they had to evaluate. What's the statistical base of black pilots? And you had to be a pilot at that time, but you had to be a test pilot as well. And so, how do you find a black guy that has any kind of credential that we could turn into an astronaut guy? And it turns out that there was only 125 black pilots in the entire world. So now you got 125 people to choose from, and the first thing they got to be under 30. So you got 90 of those 125 Tuskegee Airmen, and they're over 30. Okay, the Marines had one black pilot, the Navy had one black pilot. Okay, and the rest of the residual pilot, there were three black pilots that flew for Air France, but they were left over from World War II. So now you got the age thing that just wipes out just about everything. Now, blacks didn't discover engineering until 1955 for the most part. I mean, some blacks got engineering degrees, but I'm talking about in mass quantity, where you got a lot of black people with science background, and so you had to be a scientist of sorts, either engineer or a scientist, okay? And your flying time, you had to have a minimum of 1,500 hours of jet flying time, and so as you take each one of those parameters and squeeze it out, I'm sitting here with 27 years old, with 2,200 hours of jet time. I got an aeronautical engineering degree, and if you're in the military, the fourth parameter was the last 3 effectiveness reports that you got as an officer in the Air Force had to be rated outstanding. And so my last 4 were outstanding. And so here I'm sitting here with this set of credentials, and your card falls out. Well, they don't know what was my physiology? Was I tall? Was I dark skinned? Was I this or the? On paper, this guy's a real cool guy. And then I comes along this 5'4" short guy, that's big enough to spit, and I fit all these credentials, And so they had to deal with what they had to deal with.
Cockpit size. Perfect cockpit size, right?
Well, not really, not really. But and now I assumed that there would be, 5 or 6, at least 5 or 6 guys that, and if they got one out of that 5 or 6, it was a win, I had no idea that I was going to be plunked into the middle of this whole morass, and I'm looking around for just a buddy, somebody I can talk to, but nothing, so I'm totally isolated, so I had to work my way through that, So, but that's how they ended up selecting, and I was the guinea pig.
Well, there are some good credentials behind you.
Yeah.
Nonetheless.
Well, yeah, there's a lot more to people's makeup, the stuff on paper, what are they made of, and what are they. Are they worker bees, or are they pompous asses, or you had to have a whole range of personality to deal with, and in the beginning, I didn't fit that slot of being this tall, arrogant, swagger guy, and the first 7 guys, they'd already selected the first 7 guys, and they had 7 swaggering dudes, and John Glenn was the only one of these guys that had any sense, by the way. But he was a well-rounded, really straight arrow guy, But you had 7 big-time guys there that felt that they were superior to other folks and other things, And NASA needed that, because of we go back to this tax base thing. Because NASA, they don't know what to do with NASA. Sputnik came over, and we reacted to that, and we started shooting up missiles and stuff like that, but it didn't do anything to get money for NASA. And so when you stick a man in there, Now you got something cooking. America goes, God, yeah, give them all the money they want. I mean, God, they give this guy. We got to save this guy wherever he goes. I mean, we got to keep him alive and come back and tell us stories, and you know, and he's got to be a super guy. And so they spend a great deal of time making these 7 guys super guys. You know, I mean, they're you know, and so the public. That was the public, you know, with Tom Wolfe writing the right stuff, and those are all the things that they were writing about. Those, you know, and then president, who, and this is so bizarre. Those guys were appointed in 1959. In 1961, Dwight comes along, 2 years later. Okay, now how do you? Come on, guys! We got these 7 swagger guys, and then there's Dwight. And is Dwight going to join the club? Is he going to slide on in there with those other 7? What's up with this? And America said, what? Well, wait a minute now. Let me get this straight now. He's black, you know, and if he can do it, those guys aren't not so heroic, you know. And if a woman can do it over here, those guys ain't so hot. They're just regular people. We can't let that know. So we gotta fix this system up so that those guys remain intact, you know. And naturally they got all the money they needed to do what they needed to do. But it meant, you know, keeping this thing tight, so they'll let the public know that these superheroes did it, you know. And you know.
So then, do you? Because I know you did a lot of your own flying outside of training. Do you miss flying? Yeah, I do. You know, so much so after I left the military, you know, me and some of the guys that had left, we started an executive flying service where it was called executive aviation. So I had a consulting firm, and so I was working with corporations that had propeller airplanes, right? And I would help them transition their pilots, and I'd pick a jet out. They'd give me their parameters, their requirements that they want as a corporation. Then I would design an airplane, like whether it was a Falcon or the Learjet or whatever, and I'd recommend it. Then I would help train their pilots. You know, what does flying mean to you? Like, what does flying do for you?
Well, no, from the beginning, it's a freeing exercise of having zero restrictions on anything, because it's almost like emulating a bird, and a bird is free. He flies all day and does all these wonderful things, you know. And that's the closest thing to that level of freedom, you know. And, you know, sitting in an airplane and like transport pilots or airline pilots, you sit in there, it's like driving a big bus in the air, you know, and there's no freedom there because everything is restricted, and you're called on to go from point A to point B. But if you're a fighter jock, you can take that airplane and you can roll it and do loops and rolls and cheat death and stall and not stall and do all these wonderful things.
You do make it sound good.
Yeah.
So then tomorrow, it's the Apollo 11 anniversary. Does that mean much to you?
Well, yeah, I mean, of course, you know, it means that, you know, I really like this country. It's really kind of cool, you know, to be here. And this stuff couldn't have happened in another country. You know what I'm saying? The stuff that happened to me could not have happened any place else other than here. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, it was incredible. I would love to have been a part because I would have got it at the tail end of Apollo. I would have been. Dave Scott went up, and he was my classmate in test pilot school, and then the other, there were 2 astronaut programs, by the way, you know, NASA, and then the Air Force had an astronaut program, and so you know, to that extent, I get flabbergasted at the amount of engineering and the perfection in the engineering and the probing in the engineering, because that's what the thing was all about. This stuff was all programmed because all the astronauts do is ride. Now, if something goes wrong, they inject the astronaut into the loop. But everything else is done with computers. I mean, from the takeoff to landing, everything is all computerized, you know. And so you don't get a chance to do anything unless something goes haywire, like in Apollo 13. And so, but you're there for the ride. but the real people who really do all this stuff are on the ground, you know, and you get the glory and all that all fun stuff, but they collectively don't get the glory. And Apollo, this anniversary, a lot of them are being recognized in some of these things that are, these documentaries that are coming out. And I think it's cool, yeah.
So how glad are you that America eventually made it onto the moon?
No, it's super. Well, no, I was just down at Kennedy Space Center. I got back yesterday from the Kennedy Space Center, and you know, these guys are already laying out the thing. They're going back to the moon, and they just want to put bases up there where you go up and stay, you know. And they're doing the same thing with Mars, you know. And I think that's cool. The only thing that bothers me, they don't have 7-Elevens on the moon, so that would. You know, I couldn't buy my lottery tickets or that sort of thing, but yeah, they're going back and they want to do bases up there and they had a continual orbit or a reception thing. When you get into lunar orbit, then you just transfer to that lunar thing, and then you go down to from there, and then you do your stuff on the moon, and they're going to have you staying there for a time. And I think it's pretty cool.
Absolutely, especially if we get to go to Mars.
Yeah.
But, and then tell us sort of what happened after you now are an accomplished artist.
Mm-hmm. Well, what people don't know, I was an artist first, and then the engineering stuff intervened. I've been an artist since I was 2. I went to preschool since I was 2 years old. And I was doing art at 2 years old. I mean, I was actually drawing images and doing things. And I was imitating cartoons that were in the paper. And I was an artist kid. And I would my mother had me in every single art class that you can imagine. And I was making things. My grandfather was a junk man, and he taught me how to manipulate metal. And, you know, and I'm 3 or 4. I was his right-hand man. I'm 3 and 4 and 5 years old. We were making plows and doing that because I lived on this farm, and you know, and so my brain-hand coordination was really, really good, and my interest in things outside of myself were incredible. And what I mean by that, we were just talking about birds. I was a bird watcher, and I got all involved in birds, and I was at the airport every day. Our farm we could walk to the airport. And so I was all into that. But I drew airplanes. I drew every airplane in the American inventory.
So what kind of art do you create?
Yeah, I do giant-sized memorials. And I've done 129 memorials around the country. And I was really seduced into doing this because after I got out of the military, I was doing a lot of other things. I went to work for IBM for a little while, then opened up a restaurant chain. Then we had the flying service. Then I got into construction, and I was building apartments and condos in new cities in Colorado, and you know, I was doing all these things, and I had all these cars and Porsches and Mercedes Benzes and Learjets, and I was rolling. And this guy, our first black lieutenant governor, saw some art that I had done from my junk on my construction sites, and I had it in my house. And I was just welding these pieces of metal together, making art for my house. And he comes up to me and he calls me into his office, and he says, they want to do a sculpture of me, Ed, as the first black lieutenant governor of the state of Colorado. And I said, why are you talking to me? And he says, because you're going to do it, because I'm going to make you're going to be the most famous sculptor in history when I get through with you. And I laughed at him. I said, dude, you know, and I was making some serious money, you know. I was rolling. and he told me this story about black people. And I was 42 years old. And he told me, he said, Dwight, that for 350 years, black people have been in North America, right? And we've been slaves, but we've done some wonderful things. But if everybody on Earth was wiped out, okay, and the Martians came down to reconstruct the cultures of what happened in America, you never know that a black person ever existed on American soil. And I said, so what? I mean, what's the big deal, you know? And so he looked at me, what are you talking about? I says, so he asked me questions about, do you know who Harriet Tubman is? I says, what did she do? I had never heard of her. Frederick Douglass? Nope, no. And he went down the list, a hit list of all the famous black people. I had never heard these people in my life, man.
Yeah, right.
And he called me a bad word. And he brought these books in there, about 16, it was 8 books in 2 piles, 16 books. I don't know where he got these books from, on slavery, and I didn't even know that was slavery. And I read them books, and I got immediately upset.
And that's how
I quit. I sold all my companies. I went back to the University of Denver to get well, first of all, I finished his sculpture with what's in the Capitol. And then he gave me this big, huge deal to do a whole series of art of why black folks came to Colorado. And once I read all them books, I said, I got it. So I quit doing everything and sold everything and went back to school to get a master's. And in 6 months, I was head of the sculpture department at the University of Denver.
You've had an amazing life, not gonna lie.
So
Can
anyway.
I lastly ask you, you told us a little bit about how the hardships of being the first black man into aeronautics. And then today's climate is a lot of the same sort of talk about back then when, there was the whole rights movement coming into it with Donald Trump and stuff.
Right.
Do you think there's been a good positive progression to now from when you were growing up and when you had all those hardships and the segregation to now? Do you think there's a good positive change that has happened?
No, I think it's worse. I think it's oh yeah. I would take that, the stuff that we went through, and I was just telling somebody a little while ago. I was discriminated against, and I didn't know it. I thought I was discriminated against because I was short, and not because I was black. So I had all these incoming, insults, and I just didn't. I didn't take it personally, and I integrated a white school back in 1948, for Christ's sakes, and I had gone through that walking into that little white world, and all of a sudden, so after I left there, I went into the military. I never saw black people anymore. I mean, and I went to this white school, and I lived in this little bubble.
Now you think it's worked?
Yeah, because we have a gentleman in Washington, D.C. that is systematically unraveling the whole basis of our existence. And there are a few white people that are on this guy's side about allowing that to happen, but it's, we're only reading a part of it up here about what's happening. Under the bottom here, I mean, we have systems and programs that have been in existence that have caused a sense of justice for us, to allow us to get good jobs, and all this stuff is being dismantled one little piece at a time by this guy. And so we're in a lot of trouble in the black community. An example of this, I had a project in the agriculture department. Okay, I was commissioned to do the longest longest executive in the agriculture, a black guy by the name of Pearlie Reed. They commissioned me to do it. We went up there, sent the sculpture up, and we had all our speeches planned and everything. I'm getting ready to get on a plane. I get a call saying, don't come. Trump's people walks in there. They found out we were honoring this black man in the agriculture department and said, get that thing out of here. We'll be honoring no African Americans during the Trump presidency in a government building. What? Give me a break. What's up with that? That's crazy. But that's the kind of stuff that's this unraveling stuff is going on now, and it's happening in real time and in our face.
That's it.
Yeah.
I wish I had